It's not a huge amount of time to be able to go into great depth, so I'm going to try my best to kind of identify actually what are the issues around the messages that young people and children get through different types of media, what's the solution to that, and then give you some really practical advice at the end about some of those things that you might like to try. And hopefully there'll be some time at the end for some questions. Just so you know, I'm going to tell you a couple of stories now around these figures that may be hard to hear, but I think it's really important that we understand the context of what we mean when we're talking about difficult media messages. So 6,500 in 2010 and 2011, that was the number of children and young people treated in hospital for eating disorders. 433, the number next to that, that's the number of children under the age of 12 who were admitted to hospital within that year for the same reason. 14, that is the age of a girl who took her life last year. You probably heard about it in the news. It was a young girl who had posted questions on a website called Ask FM, where you put up questions and people can give anonymous answers to that. She had some horrendous responses on that, some of which told her that she should just go and die. She then chose to end her life as a result of that bullying. Loneliness. Loneliness is the biggest reason given for the sharp rise of self-harm in children and young people. They are so connected, more connected now than they've ever been, and yet loneliness is one of the biggest feelings that they would talk about when they talk about how they really feel behind closed doors when nobody else is around. 13. 13 is the age of a girl who took part in an amateur porn video last year after she was sexting with older boys in the school that she went to. 13. And 17. That's the age of a boy in Fife, who again you may well have heard about in the news. He took his life when he was being blackmailed online. He thought that he was talking to an American girl his age. That's what he'd been told by the person he was chatting to. In fact, he was chatting to a group of older men who then got him to say very explicit things and blackmailed him, trying to get money out of him. And he ended his life. Now, we may look at these facts, look at these statistics and say, but not my young people, not the children that I work with. My challenge is that in some way, shape or form, our young people, our children, are beginning to go down that road. It doesn't mean they're here yet, but it means that in some way they are influenced, both in positive and in negative ways, by the media. And we have a real challenge on our hands as to what that means about how we educate them about understanding what the media is telling them. They are engrossed in media. If we think that we can say to children and young people, just put down your phone and therefore they're not involved in media, that's not true. The media is their phones, it's their iPads, it's their computers, it's the magazines they read, it's the film that they go and see, it's all of those things. Anything that gives them a message, that tells them a story. They are impacted on a daily basis by media, and some of those messages may be positive, but there are many that are way more challenging. And we have the challenge as children's and youth workers to discuss actually how do we help them to understand, to really understand what they're hearing and seeing and reading. So what do we mean when we talk about media messages? Here's just some of the things. So there's some very clear gender perceptions in there. There would be a stereotypical woman, a stereotypical man. The man to be muscly, tall, sporty, funny, clever, be able to have a joke around, to be just the coolest guy on the planet. The gender stereotype of a woman would be to be thin, to be pretty, to have money, to go out shopping all the time, to look beautiful constantly, to have the long nails, to have the long hair, to have the made-up face. Those are stereotypes that we may sit in this room and say, how ridiculous. But for many children and young people, that's what they see and what they perceive to be the right way that they have to look and develop and grow up into. And so that leads to issues with self-esteem and with body image. Do they look the way they think they're meant to look? And if they don't, how do they get there? What extreme lengths will they go to look like that? I don't know if any of you have heard or seen of the hot or not videos that are going around. These are videos where it's often done through Facebook, and so people say, I'm going to do my hot or not video, and then they say, like this if you want to be in my hot or not video. Then what happens is one young person, a couple of young people, will sit there filming themselves and discuss the people who have liked that post. and they will decide if they are hot or not and why. That video will then be posted online so that all their friends can see. That can cause some massive, massive self-esteem issues. If you've been rated in a public place by people that are meant to be your friends as not hot, and other people can access that, that's huge. That's massive in terms of how you feel about yourself. Another problem with media is this idea around how they understand what true friendship is and what true relationships are. When they go to the cinema and they see relationships that are just based on sex and on two beautiful people and it all just being amazing because they're just caught up in the moment and that's what a relationship is, then how do they understand what it means to be in a relationship that actually at times can be really challenging, where there are arguments but you don't walk away, where there are frustrations but you work through it? Actually, does that get portrayed on TV, in magazines and stories they hear? Not as much as the kind of picture-perfect story of what a relationship is. And it's the same with friendship. When children and young people are so often attached and communicating through online media, then what does it mean for them to have a face-to-face conversation? It doesn't mean that all media is bad, but actually how do they know to sit in a room with somebody and actually have that real conversation? Not just to text it through, but to say what they really think, to be able to speak out what they really feel. Don't know if you've ever experienced it where a child or a young person has posted something online about being so unhappy and then they turn up to a group, and if you ask them, they're like, no, I'm good. But hang on, because either that post doesn't tell the truth, or you're not telling me the truth now. So that can cause a divide. There's some struggles around alcohol there, all these neck nominate kind of stuff that has gone around. I'm sure you've seen it. We've got a couple of people that have lost their lives. Actually, for me, there's a real issue when there is a message that says you are only included when you join in with this. When you put your body and your health at risk, that's the only way that you're going to be accepted. That is an issue for our children and our young people. Life balance and free time, it might sound silly, but actually how do children and young people learn what it means to just be? Because the options are endless. They can play their computer games, they can go on their phones, they can go on the iPads, they can do all of those different things, they can sit and read magazines. Actually, how do they just learn to be themselves? To just be without any connection. What does that look like? And I wonder for some, particularly younger children, they're not going to understand what that really means without our help, because there's always something they can engage in, always something that's going to catch their attention. There's a huge issue, and this won't surprise you, around how children and young people understand sex. Sex is understood as a very throwaway thing now. It just is what it is in the moment, and it's nothing more than that. That's portrayed in films, on TV. Soaps are some of the worst for giving out that message that says sex is just momentary and there is nothing more than that. And this idea that I think underlies all of that is that these media messages actually grow this huge self-doubt in children and young people. Who are they? Who are they really? Not who are they when they think about what a character on EastEnders is like. Not who are they when they've read a magazine and they've seen somebody on the front cover they think they should look like. Just who are they? Without any of those other messages, who are they and what do they think they should be about? Just a few statistics very quickly. About 95% of people own a TV set and watch an average of 3 to 4 hours a day. That is a lot of messages that will come across in that time. By the end of the 20th century, so obviously we're 14 years on, I'd imagine these statistics would be higher by now. Over 60% of men and 50% of women read a newspaper each day, and nearly half of girls aged 7 and over, 7 years old, read a girls' magazine each week. That's really challenging in terms of the messages that are seen in those papers and those magazines. And we might say actually, people don't really read newspapers as much anymore. The chances are they're still reading those newspapers, but actually that's been transferred to online things. But that doesn't mean they're not reading it, it's just in a different format. Children aged 8 to 15 in the UK who use the internet at home have high levels of belief in their ability to keep themselves safe online. However, 8% of 12 to 15 say they would be very happy to give out their mobile phone number online. And 21% say they might be concerned, but they'd still give it out. But I think that second part concerns me more, that they would be concerned and yet they'd still go ahead and do it. 14% of children aged 8 to 15 who use the internet at home say they forget about the safety rules when online. An additional 10%, I think this is such a child and young person thing to say, they don't know whether they forget. which I think means they probably forget. But that's a quarter of children and young people who say they just forget those safety rules when they're online. 9% of children aged 8 to 18 who use the internet at home or elsewhere say that they wouldn't tell anyone or don't know who they would tell or if they would tell someone if they saw something worrying, nasty or offensive online. And 20% of parents of 8 to 12-year-olds who have a profile on social networking sites say that either they are unaware that child is on that site, they don't check their child's activity on the site, or they don't know if they check. Perhaps a slight pop out from the parents there again. I would imagine you would know if you check or not. So if those are the messages, if that's the challenge that we're facing, then actually what is the solution? What is the answer? There is this term that you may well have heard that is currently flying around, media literacy. And for me, this is something that as children's and youth workers, it's really important that we get our head around. Media literacy is the ability to access, understand, and create communications in a variety of contexts. These three different things, access, understand, and create communications in a variety of contexts. And if we can get our head around what this means, I think that we can use this to equip the children and young people that we are working with when they are kind of fighting against those media messages. Accessing, if I'm honest, is kind of a little bit out of our hands because it's literally as it sounds. It's how they access. I think the challenge we have here with children and young people is how do we help them to make good decisions about what they access. So we actually have little control when they're at home, when they're on their phones, all that sort of stuff. We can't necessarily tell them, you shouldn't be on that, you need to get off that then and there. We don't know what happens at home. But we can teach them in terms of saying, actually, should you be on that? Should you be engaging in that, or actually do you want to just avoid those things altogether? Actually, if you read a magazine every week and at the end of it you just feel really depressed about yourself, then should you be reading it? Perhaps you need to cancel your subscription to it. Perhaps you just shouldn't be looking at it. The second is around understanding communications, and I think this is where we have a real role to play with children and young people. So the challenge here is actually when they see a message, when they hear a message, when they read it, when they perhaps write it themselves, what is the real message going on? So if a young person watches a film and comes out the end of it saying, no one will ever love me, they have this amazing, perfect relationship, but I will never have that. How do we help them to critique that message? How do we help them to say, there is nothing about this film that means you're not going to be in a relationship? You may feel you're not that perfect woman in that film, but actually, she's not perfect. What is it about this film? What is it about that storyline? Actually, where is there some truth in there, but where is there some lies in there? What are the lies that you can see in here? And it's about having those grown-up conversations with children and young people, and it does impact both. And the third is around we help them to create sensible communications. And this is very much focused really around what they post online. I'm aware that for most of you working with young people, you'll say, well, you know, most of them have Facebook now. We have to be aware there are a lot of children with Facebook. I know they're meant to be 13, they are not all 13 before they get onto Facebook. And so actually there's a challenge around how do we help them to create sensible communication. So our role within that. The first is around actually how we can be enablers of media literacy. So do we understand these three things in our own lives? If we don't understand what it means for us to wisely access different types of media, if we don't understand what it means for us to really understand what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're taking in, and if we don't understand what it means to create positive communication, then we're going to struggle to communicate that with the children and young people we're working with. I think it is really important that we understand the different media engagement of children and young people. It doesn't mean we have to access it all, but if you don't know what chat roulette is, if you don't know what Ask FM is, then how are you going to have an open and honest conversation with a child or a young person about those things? I think it is really important we take responsibility for teaching children and young people what it means to be safe online. That we don't assume that actually they're fine and someone else will teach them, but we can work with them in that. We need to be willing to hold open and face-to-face conversations with young people. If we let them sink into this media world and never hold honest face-to-face conversations, we teach them that it's okay to live a digital online life and never have to speak up in front of somebody's face. And lastly, as I've already said, be mindful of your own media engagement and your own media literacy. Actually, how well are you doing? What messages have you taken on that perhaps you need to say, actually that's a lie? You know, I've picked that up somewhere along the line and I think this is true, but this is not true. So just to finish, a few really practical things that I would like to suggest. I'm aware I cannot give you loads and loads of practice things. I have got here at the end, if it's helpful for you, a whole list of websites and organisations who provide resources for working with children and young people around helping them to understand media, who would offer training for youth and children's workers, all that sort of thing. So do feel free to come and take one of these at the end. So here's some suggestions. I would suggest that rather than telling them to avoid particular books or particular films, if they're going to watch them anyway, be brave enough to have the conversation about them. I think sometimes we feel our role is to say, no, you shouldn't do that. You definitely shouldn't be doing that. However, if they're going to do it, then do they know they can come and have a conversation with you around the messages that are in those particular films or magazines or TV programmes that they are accessing. Discuss what real friendship looks like. Talk about that with them, help them to understand that. Help them to critique both the truth of direct and generalised messages. So what that means is actually, do they understand the truth? If they get a text directly to them that's really hurtful, help them to understand the truth behind that. But also, when they read a magazine and they see a particular stereotype and feel that's what they have to fulfil, how do you help them to understand the truth of that as well? Where possible, I would encourage you to work with local schools in helping them to help children and young people to become media literate. And last few things, hold the awkward conversations. We are very good, I dare to say, particularly in Christian settings, at avoiding the awkward conversations because we think we can say, well, you shouldn't be doing that, and therefore children and young people don't do it. I'm afraid that's not true. So perhaps we need to have the awkward conversations, for example, around porn, around sexting, and actually what that means to them, what that means in terms of their relationships and their friendships and how that impacts on them. Be the place where they can come and have those open conversations. Bring specialist practitioners into your group. Please don't feel like you have to be the answer to everything. You don't have to know everything, I don't have to know everything. That's why there's loads of amazing organisations out there that kind of write these materials, run this training, work with children and young people on a daily basis. Bring them in to be able to talk about those things. Create a safe space. As much as possible, try and have places where children and young people feel they can come and they can talk about anything. It doesn't mean you're always going to agree with what they say. It doesn't mean that you can always say you're going to keep those things confidential, but where they know they can come and have that conversation. Actually, I saw this film and this particular thing I saw really traumatised me. Can we have a conversation about that? Those are the sorts of conversations that we need to foster. And finally, I would encourage you to run training sessions with parents, partner with them. This is not fully your responsibility, this is not fully the parents' responsibility, but you can work together on this. Actually, for some parents, they feel totally out of their depth in understanding what it means to keep their children or their teenagers safe in terms of their online world and what magazines mean and all that sort of thing. So kind of partner with them, work with them, say actually what's your role, what's their role, and how can you work together in that. I'm going to stop there. I may have gone over my time a little bit. It's way